Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stay Paid, the sales and marketing podcast from ReminderMedia, where we bring you the actionable advice to help you grow your business so you can live a life of freedom tomorrow, but only if you take action today. My name is Joshua Stike, Vice President of Marketing here at ReminderMedia, and with me is Luke Acree, President of ReminderMedia.
What is up, everybody?
Today, our guest is David DeCelle, and it's an interview that I know Luke and I are both really excited about because David is actually out there speaking with and helping financial advisors live to their highest potential. As a former successful advisor himself, very successful, he took his last team from being ranked 300th out of 350 teams all the way up to being the #1 performing team in the country in just 5 years. But he's currently coaching FAs on how to put together personal branding strategies to increase their exposure and authority in the marketplace through his company, the Financial Advisors Alliance, which is a company he started that is for advisors by advisors. Each and every day, the Financial Advisor Alliance releases valuable information for free so other FAs can grow their practice without the common financial hurdle faced by most other training programs. David, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us here on Stay Paid.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to diving in.
Yeah, David, thank you so much. Guys, just to let you know, we got connected with David through LinkedIn. And I'd like to mention that because just like you guys that are listening to this podcast, we're growing our business and networking every single day. And I believe it was our vice president of our finance team that, found David on LinkedIn, reached out to him, started communicating. Then David and I had a phone call and have gotten to know each other a little bit. And now have started to network together and hopefully doing some things together here in the future. But that's how business works. It literally is reaching out, starting a conversation, and it leads you to where you're on podcasts together, you're exchanging value together. I always like to point that out because I know a lot of you guys are waking up today just like me and going, hey, how do you build connections? How do you build relationships? How do you add value? And this is something that, very basic. We just literally found David on LinkedIn, messaged him, started talking, and here we are today. So David, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. I love it too, guys. So because you got to watch the video. If you're just listening to this, Stay Paid, go to our YouTube channel and watch the video because David is what I would call a young hustler, as Grant Cardone would say. Because this guy, you wouldn't think he's young, but man, this guy is super young and killing it and hustling. So David, if you could introduce yourself to our audience, give them your backstory. I like to say the 30,000 foot view, just kind of introduce them to how did you get into the business? What has led you on this journey to starting a coaching firm and ultimately where you're at today?
Yeah, so thanks for teeing me up. So basically, I was an advisor fresh out of college. I started with the firm as an intern, transitioned full-time immediately upon graduation. I literally graduated on that Saturday and went into the office that Monday. A lot of my friends were taking, a couple weeks or a month-long sabbatical, if you will. And I was like, no, let's just get right to it. So I spent 7 years building my practice with the firm. And 5 of those years, as Josh was mentioning, I ran our new advisor development program and balanced that alongside my practice. And as you mentioned, where you're ranked, based on recruiting, retention, production, the amount of bodies that are in your unit, so to speak. And we were ranked 300th out of 350. And then in that first year, I actually didn't quite keep track of it, but if anything, we moved backwards in ranking, because at the time I was and if you're watching the video, I got my finger quotes up. I was a 22-year-old leader, whatever that is. I didn't have a ton of life experience behind myself. And I was coaching, kids who were fresh out of college. I was, coaching people who were transitioning out of other careers who were older than me. And it was just sort of a weird makeup. And I didn't really know what I was doing in that first year. And then I spent a ton of time between personal development, professional development, leadership development, hiring my own coaches along that journey, both internal to the organization and external in the outside the organization, and really focused on becoming a leader. And over the next 4 years, we scraped and clawed our way all the way up to being the #1 performing team in the country for, it was 8 of the last 12 months that I was there before I transitioned out. And it was throughout that journey that I just really fell in love with coaching and consulting, because I've always been big on, the 3 things that the financial advising career sort of pushes, which is impact, income, and independence. And I've really spent a lot of time realizing that the more impact you have, the more income that you're going to have. So yes, I can go out and I can acquire 50, 60, 70 new clients on my own in a given year. But if I can go ahead and teach 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people how to go and do that same thing, that impact is then multiplied. So I basically came to a crossroads where I said, okay, I want to help more advisors grow their business, help them impact their communities. But the firm that I was with basically said, yeah, you can do that, but it has to only be with our advisors, right? So again, I was limiting myself. So I made the tough decision and decided to go into business for myself. And throughout that journey, and the journey that I'm on right now, it brought me to, working with individual advisors, working with, the $1 billion firms that are out there, and actually expanding into other marketplaces. So I do a lot of work with real estate agents, mortgage loan officers, business owners. I do a lot of work with some attorneys and CPAs, realizing that there's so much crossover and so many similarities between one industry and the next in terms of just general business practices, that it's just allowed me to sort of open up the floodgates and help people outside of just the FA space because of the amount of similarities that there are.
No, I love that, man. I love that impact, and it leads to income. I think that's so true. I think Gary Vee is a huge, he pushes that so hard that if you focus on money, you won't make any money. If you focus on value, you'll make tons and tons of money. So I think that's a very similar theme right there. Can you tell us, because you grew such a successful team, but at the first year you went back, right? You said, and then it took you and you scraped and you clawed to get up to where you're like the top performing team. Our audience is probably wondering the same thing I'm wondering. How did you turn that team around? Like, what were your focus? Like, how did you generate new leads for that business? What were the main pain points and the misses that were happening that you turned around? Could you share a little deeper into that story?
So it's a multitude of different things. However, I think the main thing that was changed, which is it's a rather simple idea, but I think it's very important, is that the mission of our program when I first took over was to identify the future leaders of the firm and to make sure that they're better off having met us than having not met us. And that was sort of the mission and what we sort of strove for. And what I found in doing that is that as soon as I doubted someone that I was working with for one reason or another, as soon as I doubted someone, I would sort of mentally check them out. And I wouldn't coach them as best as I could because it was like, well, you're not going to be a future leader of the firm, so what's the point? So then in that following year, we went back to the drawing board and we just flipped that mission around. And we said, okay, the mission of this program is to make sure that you are better off having met us than having not met us, because that has nothing to do with whether or not you're working at the firm, right? That has everything to do with developing you as a human being. And beyond that is, we want to identify the future leaders of the firm. So we started with that shift in our mission. And what I integrated into our training program wasn't just how to sell insurance, how to sell investments, how to prospect, et cetera, but we spent a lot of time on personal development. And what happened was, these men and women who were in our organization started getting that feeling that, okay, David and this company actually cares about us. So it caused everyone, even if they weren't going to do this for a while, everyone was still pulling from the same side of the rope. So that was the main major change as it relates to lead generation and things like that. And we're going to get into this a little bit later, so I'll just be brief, but I'm a big believer in the fact that it's not about what you know, it's not about who you know, but it's actually about who knows you, and it's all about awareness, right? So that when people have the need of whatever it is that you offer, they're going to think of you when that need comes up. Because in financial services and really any industry, an easy objection for someone to give you is, hey, it's just not right. It's not the right timing, or I'm not in the market for this, even though you could help them. But when they are in the market for it, you want them to think of you. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about some branding stuff and things along those lines.
No, I love that. It's about who knows you. It's not about what you know or who you know. It's about who knows you. When you look at your firm, right, what were you guys doing cold calling? Were you using social media? Were you doing mainly sphere of influence marketing? What were you guys focused on?
So the firm that I grew up in, it was one that you come up with your typical, 200 people that right? Your marketing list, so to speak. And then you went out and a certain percentage of those people would become clients. A certain percentage of those people would just be networking partners of yours. And that's how they would build their business. And what we started integrating within that is trying to find ways in which, not necessarily to cold call, but here's how I would put it. If someone, you categorize a name, someone that you're calling as an A, B, or C, and it's not based on the amount of money that they have to invest, it's based on your connection to them, right? Yep. And we try and figure out, okay, if someone's a C, right, meaning they don't really know you, how do you get them to a B? Mm-hmm. Right? Or if someone's a B, how do you get them to an A? So how can you refer yourself in there? Or how can you find a commonality? So when we help them with networking, we would help them put together like feeder lists. So you'd be in an appointment and afterwards you do some networking. You say, hey, I plan on reaching out to, X, Y, and Z person. It seems as if you may know them based on the fact that you're connected with them on LinkedIn. Was wondering what you could tell me about them that I wouldn't already know. Now, as you know, someone on LinkedIn may have 500 plus connections. Right. Right. And if they do, right, you don't want to just put on a random name, even if it's, Mr. or Mrs. Big and you know that they're super wealthy. If they're unlikely to know them, you're wasting that space on that piece of paper. Right. So what you focus on and what we have them focus on is connectivity, not just a connection. So if they went to the same college together, maybe they spent, some time at the same firm together, or there was overlap in a particular role or whatever it may be, the likelihood of them actually knowing them was very high so that you could get referred to them. And then we did a lot of work in alumni dial. So that's like a glorified cold call where you have that, hey, I went to this high school with you, or I went to this college with you, or whatever the scenario may be.
I love it.
There's an immediate connection. So we stray away from just the cold calls. We want them, again, to have some sort of connection point. But if they are cold, based on all the resources that we have online, you can find a way to get referred to that person.
Correct. Yeah. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head. You're calling it connectivity. For us, it's called relationship marketing on our side, what we refer to it as. It's basically, there's no reason to do a cold call. And I'm a huge proponent. I love cold calling, right? There's no reason to do a cold call today. You can literally find out something about everyone, and you can find out that, and Tony Robbins says it best, you can find out what's one of their greatest pain points, right? Or what's one of their greatest desires. And once you start understanding that, that's how you can then start speaking to them in a relevant way, which ultimately will cause them hopefully to take action, whether it's investing money with you, buying real estate, whatever it is. Tell me about, let's talk about your, go ahead.
I was just saying, not just that, but like the way in which you can warm up a cold call is you take a cold name, number, and email, and you just shoot them an email first, and you let them know that you're going to call them, right? So it's almost like if we were in the same room right now and we were going back and forth and I randomly just punched you in the face, you'd probably be a little taken aback. But if I told you before the interview started, hey, Luke, at some point
I'm going to punch you.
I'm going to punch you in the face. When I do it, you're going to be like, oh, you got me, right? Like,
yeah, it's great, man.
You can sort of play off that. So if you say, hey, Luke, it's David. I shot you an email yesterday. Did you happen to get that? Immediately there's that connection point, even if that connection point is just the action of sending an email.
Yeah, no, I love that point. I think it's a great sales tactic. I always teach my guys, you want to put yourself where you control the ball, where you're not passing the ball to where they have it. So even when you're leaving a voicemail, if you would say, hey, David, it's Luke. Sorry, I missed you. I'll try you back later this afternoon. You're keeping the ball in your court. Hey, but if you get a chance, call me back at 484-804. You're still keeping the ball in your court. You're warning them. What you're doing is it's the setup so you can get in. So I love that sales tactic. I think that's awesome. So is that some of the stuff you're coaching?
Yeah, you're giving yourself permission.
Yep, correct. Are you coaching that? Let's talk about your coaching business a little bit, right? So you transition here, you've built a top team. They're telling you, you have this passion and this joy for coaching, but they're saying, hey, look, you definitely can do that, but you can only coach our advisors. So you take a leap of faith out on your own. What is it that someone would get when they come and you coach them? Like, walk us through a little bit of what you coach on and how you're helping, whether it's an advisor, a real estate agent. What are you going to break down for them? What are you going to coach them on?
So when I started my coaching business, I noticed two things in the marketplace based on my experience. So number one, typically the coaches and consultants were much older than me, which there's a lot of value in their experience, but it was also tough to relate to that person. On top of that, in order to get value from them, you needed to exchange money because that was the way of doing business, right? And in my perspective, that's the old way of doing business. Whereas now, what I do is I offer a lot of stuff similar to you guys with your podcast and resources that you offer. I offer a lot of stuff for free. That way, they have a chance to get to know, like, and trust me before we even talk about paid services, right? That way, if they approach me for paid services, they're basically ready to buy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have reached out. Now, what I actually coach on is, I would work with a particular coach in my past life and they would say, hey, I coach on this, which is cool and they're hyper focused, but I try and do a really great job at just listening to what their pain points are and either help them solve those problems. That's all a coach or consultant is someone who solves problems. And if I can't solve those problems, then I'll introduce them to someone else in my network that maybe can. But the coaching services range anywhere from developing a personal brand to attract more people to you and your business, to mindset, to diving deep into your prospecting language, follow up and process, your business practices, how to create a wow client experience. That way they're talking about you to everyone. It can be how to make the sale for the annual review the year before, right? Things along those lines. So it's really taking a snapshot and listening to, okay, where's your business at now? Where are you trying to get that to? And then putting together systems and processes to actually get there. And quite frankly, a lot of it comes down to activity. And I just wrote an article, I want to say it was last week, that's titled, high activity equals low anxiety and low activity equals high anxiety.
Yeah,
right.
Love that.
So if you have one appointment on that, right? If you have one appointment on that day and they reschedule, well, that sucks. If you have 5 appointments, 6 appointments on that day and 3 reschedule, you're like, thank God I didn't have time for that anyways. So a lot of it is just educating people on the metrics behind the business, because a lot of times what will happen is they'll either get a big paycheck or they'll have a really good, like, feel good meeting and they get a lot of psychological income, but not action. Right. So it feels good in the moment, but they don't have enough activity to create that predictable, sustainable, and profitable business. And that's where the ebbs and flows come from. So a lot of my coaching is, hey, here's the actual activity that you need to have the business that you want. And I've seen people follow that system and I have not seen them fail. Yet I've seen people not follow the system, do it their own way. Some of them have succeeded, but a lot of them have failed. So if you have the blueprint, right, the book, so to speak, that you need to follow, why would you ever sway from that? And, sometimes people just aren't willing to put in the level of effort that's needed to execute on that.
Ah, so true, man. So true.
Yeah, I see that we just got done recording a podcast, and this interview will come out after that one, but literally going over your sales KPIs and tracking each step in that sales funnel. I know that that's something that you really focus on is the system. So what advice would you give someone other than getting your coaching services, but what advice would you give someone to sit down and begin to build that system? And then I guess more importantly, or after that, how do you continue to track that on a regular basis and really build that into a habitual routine in your business? Is something that's obviously going to change as you start to list out in the article that you're referring, how many calls you should be making, how many referrals you should be aiming for. What's the advice you would give to someone to sit down and start going through that?
So I think that with tracking those KPIs that you're referring to, whether it be initial appointments or phone calls or closing appointments or whatever the metric is, it doesn't really matter for what I'm about to say. But what I mean is you need to track those on a daily basis.
Nice.
I don't care if it's paper and pen or a CRM. Obviously, you prefer a robust CRM system, but the point is you just have to track it, because what it does is it removes the emotion from that day, whether that emotion is good or bad, right? It allows you to turn the page and start that new day fresh. That way you don't have, hey, I closed a big case yesterday, therefore I'm not going to work as hard the following day. It's like, no, it's a brand new day. So I think it starts with defining what your process is, what the KPIs that you're striving for, and then from there, actually tracking those and keeping a scorecard. Because at the end of the day, in a sales-based organization, no one's really holding your hand. And if you're not doing the job, you're going to be out or you're going to be broke, whichever comes first.
Amen
Usually
to that.
it happens at the same time. So it's a matter of tracking it. And Josh, I forget the part 2 of your question, but that would be the answer to the first one, which is you got to dive in and track those things diligently.
Yeah, and
because for example, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, for example, like as a financial advisor, you should, for every person that you reach on the phone, you should be booking at least half of them.
Right.
Okay. Based on the KPIs that I've experienced and I coach on. And keep in mind, these aren't cold calls, right? These are more warmer calls. And so I can look at your metrics. And if I see that you're only booking 25% of the people that you reach, well, then I know as a coach at that point, okay, we need to work on your phoning language.
Right.
Right. So by tracking your KPIs, it identifies opportunities of where to improve, because if you can just make a small shift in each of those areas, you look forward and you're like, damn, my business just 2 or 3x based on a couple small changes in my process.
Yeah.
Now, you're hitting the nail on the head. I think one of the things entrepreneurs suffer from so much is the business runs them, they don't run the business. And it's because when your feet hit the ground in the morning, you don't have the metrics that are guiding you. And I love your point that says about the anxiety. If your anxiety is high, your activity is low. And I think that's so true. Grant Cardone says for salespeople, if you are worried about losing a deal, it's because your pipeline's not full enough. You should not be worried about losing a deal. And we all know, as in sales, so much of how you close a deal really comes from your confidence. In terms of growing your business, right? What have been some of the major challenges that you've faced, and even getting out on your own and growing this coaching business? What have been some of the major challenges that you've faced as an entrepreneur?
So I think some of the major challenges is trying to balance between offering stuff for free and then having the courage and the audacity to then ask for money at some point.
Yeah.
And that was sort of when I had first started, right? It was, I wanted to do this the quote unquote right way. Like I wanted to build relationships with people and provide them value, knowing that it's going to come back, at the end of the day. So it was trying to, as I was building this content and doing webinars or building an online course or whatever, it's like, okay, well, what should I give away for free and what should I pay for, or what should I charge for? So that was one of the major challenges. And then the other challenge I would say is, I think I underpriced myself, at the very beginning for my services, whether it be individual coaching or consulting and things like that. And what ended up happening was some of the people that I started working with at the beginning, what's interesting is that the less they pay you, the more of a pain in the butt they are, and the less they actually follow through on stuff. The more they pay you, the more they listen and actually follow through, right? So I started increasing prices, and as soon as I started doing that, I realized I could spend more time with those people, provide more value to them, and they're going to have more impact on their business. So it was the balance between free services and paid services, and then of those paid services, how much to actually charge.
So how did you overcome that?
I'm finally now
How did you overcome that? How did you build your confidence?
So I have a coach myself as well, and he just said, as of today, your price is X, and you're not going back. So good. That's gold right there. It was literally just flipping the switch and making the decision.
You know why that's gold for everybody who's listening to this is because he has a coach, which I'm assuming is probably a super successful person that you want to be like, right? That has done things and has experience that maybe you don't have, right? Someone you look up to, right? And here's a person, they're not necessarily telling you a grandiose plan. They're literally just saying, nope, we're making a decision. Today is the day and you're going to charge more for it. And that's what it's going to be. Made a decision, burnt the bridge. It's going to be that. You can't go back. And you hear that so often. I remember going to 10X GrowthCon, and here's a billionaire up on stage, not Grant Cardone, it's a guy named, I think, Narmeen or something like that, Narjeem or something, but he's worth like $1 billion. And he's saying the key to his success was literally just burning the bridge. It's just making a decision, burning the bridge, and moving forward. That's why that decision is gold. I love that. So let me ask you this next real question. And this is out of my own curiosity, because we put out so much free stuff, right, Josh? We put so much effort and money into putting out value for free because we believe, like you do, that it will return 10x. Has it returned for you? Like, in all honesty, being as real as can possibly be, when you look at all the stuff you've done for free versus what you're making and getting paid for now, has it been worth it to you? Has there been mistakes in the free content that you've put out?
So what I would tell you is that things are still unfolding.
Yep.
What the free content has done so far is obviously it's generated revenue. Otherwise, I would have closed shop already, right? Exactly. But what I would tell you is that it's created a ton of clout. So when someone does their research on me, right, they can go on whatever social media platform, they can go on my website, and they can see everything that I've done. And to the point where they can't scroll to the bottom because there's so much stuff. So what it does is it positions you as the authority figure. Right, it positions you as the trusted advisor, so to speak. And things that I'm in the process of working on right now is it's generated introduction to send out 6- and 7-figure proposals to these multi-billion-dollar firms to help them redevelop and digitize their training programs. So that's why I said it's created a lot of clout. It's created enough revenue for me to continue to do this. But the stuff that's on the horizon has all come from the free content that I've created. So everything is sort of in works through Q4 and Q1 for those larger ticket deals. But the biggest thing that it does is it creates clout and it positions you as the authority figure. That way, when someone does their research, they have plenty of ways to sort of get to know who you are, right? It's rather than a resume, they get to go online and see who I really am.
Yeah, it forms the, it helps form the impression
on a piece of paper.
Now, yeah, I agree with you. I think we've seen the same thing in our own business, is that it really positions you as the authority or, on the subject matter, which builds that trust. And we all know, you said it on this podcast, we say it all the time, in order to close a deal, you got to be known, liked, and trusted. Content gets you known, liked, and trusted. It's one of those things that can help with the trifecta. You've actually written a book recently on branding, right? And on, how to position yourself as the brand of choice. I mean, talk to us a little bit about this book. What are you hoping that people get out of it?
So from building my personal, it's interesting. So when I was an advisor, I did a lot of the outreach myself to gather my own clients, right? Making 40, 50, 60 phone calls a day.
Right.
And I didn't really focus much on personal branding whatsoever. And I told myself when I started this business that I wanted to do it differently. Not that I was afraid to pick up the phone, and I still picked up the phone plenty of times, but I wanted to prove to myself that I could attract people to me. So what I did was I compiled a list of different mistakes, right, that I was making as I was building my personal brand, trying to leverage it off my plate and not owning it myself, right? Whether it was hiding behind text and pictures and not showing my face, right, to give them the opportunity to actually get to know, like, and trust me, not just my words, right, and things like that. So the goal of the book, it's actually funny. The goal of the book is to A, get people to avoid those mistakes, right? Obviously. B, to get them to start building their personal brand, whether they're an employee, an employer, entrepreneur, business owner, whatever it is. Like, a personal brand is so critical. And quite frankly, the third thing is that when you show up to speak and you have a pile of books with your picture on it, it just helps positioning you as the authority. I
love
more.
It, man.
So,
yes.
There's obviously a motive behind it as well, business wise, and it leads with helping people and impacting them, and it ends with additional revenue to the company.
In today's age, everybody has a brand. Whether you know it or not, you have a brand. So why would you not want to be out in front of it and controlling what people perceive of your brand versus what they're going to find out about
absolutely.
you?
So, I mean, David, talk a little bit about how did you go from a producer, a leader, manager within an organization to then becoming a content creator? I mean, as you're moving into coaching and putting all this free content out there, how did you transition into that? Were you always good at writing? Is this something that you always had the ability to do? You're shaking your head.
I was the type of person in college where I'd find out which one of my boys finished their paper already, and I'd be like, "Hey, can I take a look at it?" and change a bunch of
He was a salesman.
Hated writing. Right. I didn't hate writing, although I hated writing on the topics that were assigned. Is what I came to find out, and it's interesting. Back before I started my business, I read Gary Vee's book, Crushing It. And I ended up finishing that in a couple of days. And then within a couple of weeks, I had read all his other books, and then I just took immediate action. I started my business like a month after that.
Love it.
And just put my head down, and I was, my routine now is most of my content that I create, is done between the hours of, 4 in the morning and 7 in the morning. So I'm done all my content creation and my own personal well-being, whether it be gym and meal prep and stuff like that, is all done typically before other people are even awake. So it's a matter of learning it, implementing it, and then doing it when there aren't any other distractions because everyone else is sleeping at those hours. And that's when I get my best creativity. So like when I was writing my book, it was literally just when I would wake up first thing in the morning, I'd sit down and write for 30 or 60 minutes, and you compound that over 5-6 months, and you wake up and you have a book. It's not rocket science. It's just the little steps that you do on a daily basis add up.
I think that's something that a lot of people, I know when we talk about creating content, using this as lead generation for your business or a way to put yourself out there as an industry expert, it's always a struggling point because it's like, well, I'm not a writer, I don't create this. But what you're saying and what I'm hearing is you're listening to others, right? So going through and reading everything that Gary Vee wrote, that's automatically going to inspire you and start to almost shape your own style, probably in a way, kind of looking at that and reading from other authors and then taking that style and being able to apply it with your own thoughts. And the other thing, which will lead us into our next question, is making it a daily habit. Making it something that you're committing to every single day, where I know Stephen King used to say this as an author. He would force himself to write, Jerry Seinfeld was the same way, to write an hour a day or to write a certain amount of hours a day, whether or not there was a great idea or inspiration.
Some of the best songwriters in Nashville do the same thing. They forced themselves to write songs every day.
Yeah, and ultimately it's driving the success in your business. What are some other things? Are there any other 2-3 things that you do every single day or that you coach your FAs on doing every day to really drive your success, whether it's in business or your personal life?
So before I get to that, just to hit on something that you had just said, and this is a Gary Vee-ism, is that when you first start off and you don't think that you're a good writer, that's okay because no one's reading your stuff anyways, right? So in the beginning, it's just a matter of finding your own voice, right? It's just a matter of finding your own voice and your own style. And what I found is the best way to write is the way in which you talk, right? So like gone are the days of like the MLA format BS in school and like having these references and this. It's just like, no, just write from the heart, right? It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. But in terms of daily habits, I do 5 things every day. Okay, and I'll give you the categories because they're going to be different for everyone. And I'll give you examples for those categories because for me, they do shift once they become a habit. But I focus on, of those 5 things, 2 of them are moving me forward as a person. So examples of that could be reading, it could be eating clean, it could be going to the gym, something like that, right? But I focus on moving myself forward every day. The other 2 things are moving my business forward, right? So it could be X amount of phone calls, X amount of emails, X amount of content on a given basis, right? X amount of follow-up, things along those lines. And then the last thing is moving other people forward. So things that I've done in the past is, doing 2 good deeds, whether it's putting the carriage away at the grocery store, buying someone's coffee, something like that, or calling 2 people. And just checking in, seeing how they're doing. Because one thing I found when I was an advisor is that a lot of people who were close to me started avoiding my phone calls because they knew I wanted something. So now with my new business, I just call people for the sake of calling people just to check in and see how they're doing. Or another example, how to move others forward is connecting 2 people that may benefit from knowing one another without any financial reward on your end. Because what I found is that if you can have a well-rounded day every single day, you're happy, right? The days in which I wasn't happy was when like, I shouldn't have a bad day if I have like a, you know, crap hits the fan at work, even though I did the things I needed to do. Everything personally was fine, but then that crap that hit the fan that was out of my control totally robs me of my happiness from the other ways in which I move forward. So I focus on these things on a daily basis, and all of them are 100% in my control, because I can't control the results. I can just control my effort. And those are the things that I do on a daily basis. And what I do is I plan those out most of the time, the night before. That way, when I go to bed, right, the subconscious kicks in and you start envisioning, right, what's going to happen the following day. And going back to tracking KPIs, when I plan out my following day, whether it's an initial meeting, a closing meeting, a coaching meeting, whatever, I literally to a T plan out what's going to happen in that. So I may say, you know, initial meeting or closing meeting, you know, get introduced to 3 more people. And then when I go back and post that day, if I get introduced to 3 people, it's like, whoop, check mark, like awesome. If I get introduced to 1 person or 2 people, it's like, okay, well, what could I have done differently to get that extra referral? So I try and envision those things happening as much as I can. And it's crazy how it happens, but it tends to work out the way you think it should.
Dude, that's awesome. That was worth the whole podcast right there, dude. That framework, because we've asked this question multiple times to people we've interviewed. And, you know, we hear great answers, but that framework I love, because so often we go to the specifics of what we do. Like I get up and I go to the gym, or I say a prayer or something like that. But life is constantly changing. And so, you know, we talked earlier on another podcast, you live, you know, the cycle of 4 quarters in a year, and your priorities shift. And based upon your priorities, you have different things you're going to do every day. But that framework of moving forward as a person, moving business forward, and then moving others forward, it's such a great framework. Let me ask you this, David. Now that you know what you know, right? So you're still a young guy, but you've been in the business now for years. Knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell younger David? You know, what would you invest 100 times more into? What would you avoid like the plague? I mean, what have you learned? What would you tell your younger self?
So it's one major thing. So I've always been focused on the result, right? So like when I graduated college, like my goal that year was to make $100,000, right? That was sort of like my benchmark. I figured, hey, if I did that at 21 years old, like what does 31 look like? What does 41 look like? Like I'm probably not going to go backwards. And I surpassed that goal in my first year, but it didn't feel like as cool as I thought. And looking back, the year leading up to it, like I was miserable, right? I was making money, but I was miserable because I was so focused on whatever that result was. And in subsequent years, I started, you know, I was doing that same thing where I was, you know, focused on that next thing and that next thing. And I was tying my happiness to a split second of that year, because when you hit a goal, it literally happens and it's done. So like you're literally happy for a second.
Right. Yeah.
So then my coach, by the way, is Dave Meltzer, CEO of Sports One Marketing.
Oh, awesome! Yeah.
If you're not following, So if you're not following him on Instagram, you should. He's awesome. But so he always talks about having the consistent, everyday, persistent, without quit enjoyment of the pursuit of your potential. And really, what that means is just enjoying the process, understanding that every step that you're taking on a daily basis, there's an opportunity to learn, there's an opportunity to grow, and there's an opportunity to impact. And if you just measure your day in those micro moments, you end up creating your own happiness. And then whatever the result is, it doesn't matter. It's probably more than what you were shooting for, because you're maximizing every single day that you have. But it allows you to enjoy that process rather than just marrying yourself to the actual result that you're shooting for.
Yeah, man. Once you really truly enjoy the ride, that's when it all comes into perspective. And that's so hard to do. I've heard that so often in my life, and I have to constantly remind myself, enjoy the moment you're in, enjoy the ride. And because the goal, like, I mean, it's amazing what you say. It's like the rewards, once you hit them, they don't really mean anything.
Yeah, the goals.
Like every time we've hit a goal, I'm just like, all right, now on to the next one. So I think that's amazing advice, man. Great advice.
David, tell everyone where they can get in touch with you, or if there's anything that you want them to know about your coaching program.
Yeah. So in terms of where to find me, my website is simply daviddecelle.com. Last name is spelled DeCelle. Also, if you go to daviddecelle.com/book, you can order my new book that is in the midst of being printed right now. The pre-sale just ended last week.
Congrats.
So super excited about that. LinkedIn, obviously, is just David DeCelle, and then Instagram is where a lot of my content lives as well, and that's just at David_DeCelle. And in terms of coaching, hit me up on one of those social platforms. There's a lead gen form on my website. You can hit me up there, and we can see if you could be a fit. We do both consulting packages. We do monthly coaching packages, and I'll provide some references for you guys if you want to see some of those and some of the prior success that we've had with individuals like yourself, those of you who are listening. But that's where you can find me, and always looking to connect with like-minded individuals. And whether it's a quick conversation that goes nowhere monetarily, or it doesn't matter. I'm just, again, the more people that I know and the more people that know me, the more good stuff will happen eventually.
That's awesome. And definitely make sure to check out David's blog and podcast also. I know we talked a little bit about it, but if you are a professional and you're looking to create content, or you're hearing all of this advice out there about, hey, you got to be making content, you got to be bringing value, and you're not sure how, and David talked about this on the website. It's great content that he's putting out there because it's genuine. And when you read it, when you listen to it, you understand this is coming from a genuine place where you want to help people, but it's also, like you said, I mean, you're writing like you would talk on this podcast. You're writing like you would talk to any one of your clients or to your buddy about their business. So awesome stuff. Make sure to check that out. Thanks so much for being here, David. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you guys for having me. I'm excited to see where this relationship grows to.
It's going to blow up, man. That's what's going to happen. It's going to blow up.
And more importantly, thank you all for listening. If you liked what you heard today on Stay Paid, please go to iTunes, give us a 5-star rating. Make sure to leave a comment. You can also find our podcast in video. You can watch this interview on youtube.com/ReminderMedia. You can also find it on staypaidpodcast.com. Please make sure to tell someone else about the podcast today. And if you want to get hold of me or Luke, email us at podcast@remindermedia.com or find us on Instagram or LinkedIn. And of course, you can check out Reminder Media on social media. We are at Reminder Media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. For this episode of Stay Paid, I'm Joshua Stike.
And I'm Luke Acree, guys. And I'm going to close with this because I think it's awesome. I think this is the action item for the podcast as I listen to David's story. You know, he inspires because he is a young hustler. I mean, this guy is amazing of what he's accomplished at such a young age. Guys, put this framework that he just shared with us on that question where we asked him, what does he do every day? Put this framework into action. I'm going to do this for myself. It's literally, what am I doing tomorrow that's going to move me forward as a person? And that's my spiritual health, my physical health. What am I doing for myself? He said he did 2 things. Second is, what am I doing to move my business forward? So we talk about KPIs a little bit on this podcast. You know, what is that KPI that I'm going to hit? What are the dials I'm going to hit if I'm a salesman? You know, how many blogs am I going to write if I'm a writer? What am I doing to move my business forward? And then the third portion of the framework, which is, what am I doing to give back? What am I doing to move others forward? I think that framework right there, guys, is amazing. I'm going to apply it to my own life. Take action on that. Remember that the difference between a top producer and a mediocre producer in any business is they don't just hear, they hear and put into action. They take action. So take this framework, put it into action for yourself for a week, and start looking at the results and how it changes your life and changes your business. Take action on that today, guys.